Chapter 3. The Self-Regulating Market. Government bureaucrats and their allies among the currently influential opinion molders have made a practice of spreading misinformation about the nature of a free market. They've accused the market of instability and economic injustice, and they've misrepresented it as the origin of myriads of evils from poverty to the affluent society. Their motives are obvious. If people can be made to believe that the laissez-faire system of a free, unregulated market is inherently faulty, then the bureaucrats and their cohorts in classrooms and editorial offices will be called in to remedy the situation. In this way, power and influence will flow to the bureaucrats, and bureaucrats thrive on power. The free market system, which the bureaucrats and politicians blame so energetically for almost everything, is nothing more than individuals trading with each other in a market free from political interference. Because of the tremendous benefits of trade under a division of labor, there will always be markets. A market is a network of voluntary economic exchanges. It includes all willing exchanges which do not involve the use of coercion against anyone. If A hires B to murder C, this is not a market phenomenon, as it involves the use of initiated force against C. Because force destroys values and disrupts trade, the market can only exist in an environment of peace and freedom. To the extent that force exists, the market is destroyed. Initiated force, being destructive of the market, cannot be a part of the market. Trade is an indispensable means of increasing human well-being. If there were no trade, each person would have to get along with no more than what he could produce by himself from the raw materials he could discover and process. Obviously, without trade, most of the world's population would starve to death, and the rest would be reduced to a living standard of incredible poverty. Trade makes a human existence possible. When two people make a trade, each one expects to gain from it. If this were not so, then the trade wouldn't be made. And if each trader has correctly estimated how much he values the things being traded, each does gain. This is possible because each person has a different frame of reference and, therefore, a different scale of values. For example, when you spend 30 cents for a can of beans, you do so because the can of beans is more valuable to you than the 30 cents. If it weren't, you wouldn't make the purchase. But to the grocer who has 60 cases of canned beans, the 30 cents is more valuable than the one can of beans. So both you and the grocer, acting from your different frames of reference, gain from your trade. In any trade in which the traders have correctly estimated their values and in which they're free to trade on the basis of these values without any outside interference, both buyer and seller must gain. Of course, if some outside influence, such as a gangster or a politician, prohibits the traders from doing business or forces them to trade in a manner which is unacceptable to one or both, either the buyer or the seller, or both, will lose. This happens whenever laws control prices, quality of goods, time and place of purchase, as in liquor laws, shipment of goods over borders, like interstate commerce, tariffs, international trade restrictions, or any other aspect of trade. Only a voluntary trade can be a completely satisfactory trade. Money is used because it makes trading easier and increases the number and type of trades possible. If you wanted to get rid of a motorcycle and to get in exchange a 6-month supply of groceries, 3 pairs of pants, several records, and a night on the town with your girlfriend, you'd find it pretty hard to make the trade without the use of money as a medium of exchange. By using money, you can sell that motorcycle to anyone who will buy it and use the cash to buy whatever you want. Because the use of money makes it no longer necessary for the buyer to have an assortment of the exact goods the seller wants, many more and better trades can be made, thus increasing the satisfaction of everyone. Money also acts as the means of calculating the relative worth of various goods and services. Without money, it would be impossible to know how many phonographs a car is worth, or how many loaves of bread should be exchanged for the service of having a tooth pulled. Without a standard medium of exchange to calculate with, the market couldn't exist. To the extent that voluntary trade relationships are not interfered with, prohibited, regulated, taxed, subsidized, etc., the market is free. Since governments have always made a practice of interfering with markets, and indeed depend on such interferences in the form of taxes, licenses, etc. for their very existence, there has never been a sizable and well-developed market which was totally free. The United States of America, though theoretically a free country, suffers from an almost unbelievable amount of market regulation. Though often called a capitalistic country, the USA actually has a mixed economy, a mixture of some government-permitted freedom, a little socialism, and a lot of fascism. Socialism is a system in which the government owns and controls the means of production, supposedly for the good of the people, but in actual practice for the good of the politicians. Fascism is a system in which the government leaves nominal ownership of the means of production in the hands of private individuals, but exercises control by means of regulatory legislation and reaps most of the profit by means of heavy taxation. In effect, fascism is simply a more subtle form of government ownership than is socialism. Under fascism, producers are allowed to keep a nominal title to their possessions and to bear all the risks involved in entrepreneurship, while the government has most of the actual control and gets a great deal of the profits and takes none of the risks. The USA is moving increasingly away from a free market economy and toward fascist totalitarianism. It is commonly believed and taught, particularly by those who favor the present establishment, that the market must have external controls and restraints placed upon it by government to protect helpless individuals from exploitation. It's also held that governmental fine-tuning is needed to prevent market instability, such as booms and busts. A vast amount of governmental action is based on the theory that the market would speedily go awry without regulation, causing financial suffering and economic havoc. When politicians and so-called economists speak of regulating the market, what they're actually proposing is legislation regulating people, preventing them from making trades which they otherwise would have made, or forcing them to make trades they would not have made. The market is a network of trade relationships, and a relationship can only be regulated by regulating the persons involved in it. An example of government regulation of the market is price control. A price is the amount of money or other value which sellers agree to take and buyers agree to give for a good or a service. A price isn't a conscious entity and couldn't care less what level it is set at or what controls it is subjected to. But the buyers and sellers care. It is they who must be controlled if the price is to be held at an artificial level. Price control, like all other political controls and regulations imposed on the market by legislative force, is people control. Of course, such people regulation can only be imposed by the initiation of the threat and use of physical force. If people were willing to trade in the manner prescribed by the government planners, they would already have been doing so, and the market-regulating services of the planners would be unnecessary. Only by forcing unwilling buyers and sellers to act differently from what they would have if left free can government regulate or fine-tune the economy. This initiation of force against peaceful buyers and sellers inevitably causes them to act against their best interests, or at least what they believe to be their best interests. When they act against their interests, they inevitably suffer a loss of value. It is a commonly held myth that government bureaucrats know far better than the rest of us how things ought to be run, so that it's actually good for the public as a whole if some people are forced to act against their selfish interests. But this myth of the wise government planner ignores two important facts. First, you are in a far better position to know how to manage your affairs, including your business and professional life, than is some far-off, politically selected bureaucrat. And this truth is just as applicable to every other person operating honestly and peacefully in the market, especially those whose market transactions are extremely complex and important. You may make mistakes in your market dealings, but the bureaucrat's isolation from direct and immediate information about your situation and his lack of a strong personal interest in your affairs absolutely guarantee that he will make a lot more and bigger mistakes, even if he's honestly trying to help. Besides, when a bureaucrat makes a mistake in regulating your affairs, he doesn't receive any feedback in the form of economic losses to alert him to his error. You receive all of the feedback, but you aren't in a position of control, so you can't correct the error. The second important fact ignored by the myth of the wise government planner is that the individuals who are being forced by government regulation to act against their interests are a part of the very public which is supposed to benefit from these governmental controls. Therefore, a loss of value by those who are controlled is also a loss of value for the public. And because a market consists of a network of highly interconnected relationships, a loss to any person dealing in the market tends to diffuse to those doing business with him, and from them to their business contacts, etc.